thanks again to everyone for coming. We will have an excellent session. I know that. We have some excellent presenters, and we also have a wonderful lunch courtesy of our presenters. So thank you very much for that. And we're doing this by panel presentation, and we're very lucky to have Gillian, who's going to be the panel moderating the panel. She's a freelance journalist and a former editor with the Globe and Mail. She writes on capital markets issues, including M&A for Globe Advisor. And then we have the lovely woman. Shilpa is a partner at BDO in the M&A and capital markets. She's also the national leader in capital advisory. She focuses both on sell-side M&A and capital raises. And then we have Kate, I'll introduce both at the same time. Kate and Robert, who are partners with the law firm Crawley, MacKewn, and they are litigators, and they focus on many areas, and one of them being M&A litigation. So interesting topics, and I will take it away. Have a good time.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Melanie, for those introductions. Glad to have everyone here in human physical form. It's very lovely. And for those online as well. Let's just jump right in, and we'll get started here today as people munch their lunch. So Shilpa, I'm going to start with you. Right now, people are concerned about the stock market. They're fretting about inflation, and they're worried about a potential recession, that big R word, in our quasi post-pandemic world. So from your standpoint, how has this economic turbulence affected activity in Canada's mergers and acquisition market? Has it been resilient, or has it been slowed down by this uncertainty?
Thanks for that question. Very topical. So first of all, I'd like to say I'm very excited to be here and excited to be on this panel with Rob and Kate. I see many familiar rooms of faces in this room. So we'll talk about the R word in a bit, but I would agree. I think we would all agree that the tides of our economic climate are definitely shifting. For all those of us that worked in M&A, myself included, 2021 was just frenzy. We have never seen that level of M&A in our lifetime. And what's happening in the last year is, yes, deal volume has slowed down. So if you look at the chart, it has slowed down. But what we're finding is, especially in the SMB space, buyers and sellers continue to use M&A to add value. And if you take a look at that chart, overall for 2022, although the deal volumes are down, they're still higher than the pre-pandemic peak. So overall, M&A continues to move forward, and our pipeline is quite strong. What we're busy with at BDO in our M&A and capital markets practice is two things: sell-side M&A with our owner-operator clients, and also capital raising, finding financing for our owner-operator clients. On the sell-side M&A, BDO was the #1, I'm very, very proud to say, we were the #1 financial advisor globally in the league tables. Our global corporate finance team, my team, did an amazing 2,095 deals, and my team in Canada did 36 deals. So it's great. And overall, what we see for the future, to answer your question, is there is 3.4 trillion of dry powder globally. We're seeing an uptick in private equity activity, and buyers are looking to take advantage of the lower valuations. So overall, we see M&A continue to be strong in the owner-operator segment. What's also exciting is in our capital advisory business, so the business where we raise financing for our clients, we're busy with growth financing, but because of obviously the uncertain times, there is some distress that's there too. And I've worked with some of the people in this room on those kinds of transactions. But what's very interesting is that growth financing continues to occur even in this economy. So as I said, a lot of people are still looking to take advantage of the current lower valuations. And if we move to the next slide, it's a bit of shout out to all the alternative lending community in this room and on the phone. If we look at that bottom chart, what's interesting about Canada is that 40% of our lending actually comes from the alternative debt market. So these are alternative debt funds, private equity funds, and they're very, very active in Canada, especially the US alternative debt funds. And we continue to work with them quite closely. And what's interesting about them is that they're doing those deals that with a little bit of the extra leverage that the bank can't do, but they're also assisting clients with distress. So we continue to work with them. So yes, there is uncertainty, but there still continues to be good activity.
All right, so a bit of a follow-up question to that. with that in mind, what does this mean for someone wanting to sell their business right now? Is it more difficult? Is there more scrutiny?
Right now, it's all about one thing and one thing only as people are looking to sell their business, flight to quality. It's all about having those quality deals. So as we in the M&A business look to do deals, we're doing a lot of diligence up front to make sure that we are finding and working through those quality deals, and we're having quite a bit of success. As I said earlier, there's still a lot of liquidity in the market. Large, successful, well-capitalized companies are continuing to want to acquire and grow their core businesses. And as we look at the data, what's interesting is, as you said, there is a bit of a slowdown. Balance sheets continue to be fairly strong, especially stronger than other periods of slowdown. So that makes it ripe for M&A activity. Now, 2021, I'm going to be very honest, was an anomaly. A lot of deals that were done were what they would say were a flash in the pan. There were deals that have never been done in the past and will never get done again. 2022 is a bit more of a leveling out effect. So if you're a business owner and you're looking to sell, it's all about preparation, and we're helping our clients with that. So what are we doing? The first thing that all buyers are looking for right now is strong financial performance. So we're helping our clients to make sure they show the last 3 years of financial performance of their business, but also looking forward 3 to 5 years, showing that their business is going to grow. And that's very important. It's also very important for as businesses look to sell, to show that strong management team underneath the owner. We're working with our clients to make sure that they have strong succession plans and they can show those management teams. And overall, if you talk to any buyer, any private equity firms, even the private equity firms that are in this room today, it's all about synergy. And so, and supply chain optimization. So we're educating our sellers around those topics. So yes, still a good time to sell, but preparation is key.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's stop over there and chat with Rob a little bit. So Rob, as Shilpa described, these deals are still being made, but they might take a bit longer, and buyers might make some more demands of the sellers. From your standpoint, what precautions should both buyers and sellers take to protect themselves during this more turbulent than usual market?
Yeah, and so before I answer that, because that's going to be the theme that Kate and I are going to speak to during the day. Let me start with a confession. Kate and I are litigators, and so all we ever see are problems. And so we tend to have a life that is forensic, backwards looking at problems that arose and how they arose. And so what that means, and just so you can manage your expectations, what that means is we tend to be the downer in the room when it comes to this kind of thing. But the reality is that 1 out of every 5 of your deals is going to end up in a dispute. And I could say that comes from me anecdotally or my firm, but my firm only ever sees disputes. But I take that from Liberty GTS's claim study. And let me just do a bit of a shout out to Liberty GTS. They did a claim study. They've done a series of them, but the 2022 claim study, you can find it online. It is so valuable and so helpful. And it's basically a study of their claims experience in their reps and warranties product line. And so it's a good barometer of the ratio of disputes. And they would say historically over the last number of years, it's been around, closing in on 20%. Just this past period that they've been looking at, it's actually dropped to 16%. I would say to you, you should assume that 1 out of 5 deals that you do are going to result in a dispute. Some of those disputes will be smaller. Some of them will be, kind of catastrophic for either the vendor or the purchaser. And many of those disputes will end up in litigation. So, okay, so this slide that I've put on the screen for you, it's actually a graphic that comes from Liberty's claim study. And it is it's sort of a snapshot of the M&A landscape. And so I'll talk to you about it in a minute, but the thing to remember about this slide is 1 out of 5 is going to end up in a dispute. That's the key takeaway. What do you do to protect yourself? 2 things: insurance and dispute resolution clauses. And we'll dig into that a little bit later on in the talk.
So Rob, how do a lot of these disputes generally arise? What happens?
Yeah, so okay, so the reality is it's something unexpected. It's an unexpected event, but it's not always unanticipated, because lawyers like Ian are really good at anticipating what can go wrong, and they have provisions in the contract for it. But even though it's anticipated, it's not expected. I'll give you an example. You have an earn-out provision, and there's a 2-year earn-out period, say, and at the end of the earn-out period, the vendor, vendor management has not been hitting their targets. The purchaser has been analyzing it. They've been reporting to the board, and they've predicted there will be no earn-out. So, 40%, a third of the purchase price, 40%, maybe half, is not going to have to be paid. And then they land a whale at the end of the earn-out period. And when they land the whale, you think it's good news, but it creates an emotional reaction. And what happens is people then focus in on the deal documentation, the wording of the earn-out clause, the revenue recognition requirements in the earn-out, and suddenly someone comes up on the purchaser side with an argument about why, gosh, we're really sorry, revenue can't be recognized in this quarter. There's no earn-out. That led to, that was bad news for the vendors. Good news for our firm, because that led to a 1-month trial. And it's messy, it's ugly, it takes a lot of energy. It involved the public companies. There's a lot of public disclosure, and that's what you want to avoid. So this snapshot shows you what buckets those unexpected events tend to arise in. And one of the biggest is accounting standards, financial statements. That's where we see the bulk of the cases that we have. I can tell you tax is always a huge one, but financial reporting, financial statements, accounting standards, revenue recognition. I jokingly said revenue recognition was the gift that keeps on giving to my firm. We have lots of fights over it. And then around that, you'll see things like condition of assets. Anecdotally, we have active cases right now with my firm, and my firm it's a leading firm, but it's a boutique of 20 lawyers. So active cases, we got a condition of asset case, absolutely. Lots of financial standards issues, IP lawsuit, IP disputes, yes, that's happening. Third-party claims is significant. Like all of these, inventory issues, all of those. And these are all disputes that have happened after an M&A transaction. And these are just the live ones right now. So, let me just say that you need to be aware of the likelihood that your deals are going to end up in a dispute, and you got to think about how to protect yourself, which we'll talk about in a moment.
All right, I wanted to jump in to get a response here from Kate a bit. So Kate, when you look at the economic uncertainty, do you anticipate there'll be more disputes as a result of this?
So the short answer is yes. We do anticipate that there will be more disputes, but that's boring for all of you. So let's dig into it a little bit and talk about areas where we anticipate disputes may arise. You see 8 different categories of dispute up on the screen. They're not ranked in any way, but let's take a look at a couple of them. Undisclosed price increases. So COVID, which continues to have an impact on everything we do, unfortunately, and increasing inflation have led to extended periods of repricing, and that's still happening today. And that can be the basis of a dispute, particularly if the price increases are not disclosed or they're disclosed quite late in the day. Late disclosure leads to new eyes on what's been set out. Is it consistent with what we've been told before? Is this something we still want to do? Very similar, undisclosed customer incentives. You saw a lot of this during COVID to try to retain customers and attract them. That activity is continuing. And once again, particularly if it's undisclosed, disclosed late in the day, or it's outside the normal course of business, those kinds of activities are generating disputes and attracting a lot of attention. Inventory issues and accounts receivable. I'm grouping these together, and you will see that there's a theme that comes up in what I'm saying. Non-disclosure, late disclosure, inaccurate disclosure, things that tend to come as a surprise are all going to be the basis of disputes, and we expect to see quite a bit of this going forward. Fraud and cyber, which I'll group together, although they are distinct. Anytime you're in a climate like the one we find ourselves in now, where there's a variety of different pressures, the incentives to behave a little badly increase. And people who are inclined to behave badly, criminals and others, are going to seize those opportunities. So you will see that in potentially creative approaches to accounting that people need to be aware of. You'll also see it on the cyber front as more people are working from home and we're still adjusting to that new reality. As more transactions take place, anything that takes attention away from the internal controls that protect against cyber threats creates additional opportunities, which people who would like to get in and mess with your clients' businesses will take advantage of. And so I'll just stop here on the cyber front for a second. Some of your members are insurers, of course, and they'll be better positioned to speak to you than I am, but this is an area where insurance is something that your clients should be considering. And if they've already got some, take another look at it and determine whether it is adequate as you move forward. Third-party claims that your clients are on the receiving end of, particularly if they receive notice late in the day, close to a transaction, can form the basis for disputes, and we expect to see quite a bit more of that. And finally, environmental social governance, ESG, a topic that you're all very familiar with, and that is projected to be a very hot series of topics going forward. We expect to see quite a bit of disputes centered around that. We're going to come back to that at the end of the presentation, so we'll touch on that again later on.
All right, back to you a bit, Shilpa. From your standpoint, what are the challenges that business owners need to manage right now in these challenging economic times?
So now let's talk about the R word. Everybody's talking about recession. I like to use another R word. And as you can see on the chart, everybody knows this chart. Rates are going up. GDP is trending downwards. Everybody's talking about the R word. I'd like to use another R word, reset. What we're going through really is a reset beyond the frenzy of 2021. And the key thing right now, the key challenge for business owners is one thing. It's all about finding the money. As my mother used to say, everything in life is about one thing, and that's money. So it's really about finding the money. I actually worked on some transactions in 2021 with some of the people in this room today. And what I saw in 2021, I have never seen in my life as a lender. Banks were lending at a frenzied pace. And I would say right now in 2022, yes, the banks are being more cautious. Many bankers in this room from the Schedule A banks, there is more structure in underwriting. Deals are in fact taking longer, but let's look at the numbers. So we see the R word. Everybody's being more cautious, but just looking at Q2 2022 year over year. So that's the summer onwards last year when some of this uncertainty started. Lending in Canada, business lending in Canada grew 12% year over year. I was reading the bank results this morning. So Bank of Nova Scotia came out with their results, BMO came out with their results, and business banking continues to grow at double-digit rates, so 15% on average. So that's pretty good growth. So the message is in terms of financing, although it's challenging, the money's out there for the right kind of deals. What we're busy with in our practice, I was talking to some of the lenders in the community today. We're very busy with what we call business process reviews. We're helping our clients with cash flow forecasting, making sure that they have strong balance sheets, and really making sure the higher prices that they're experiencing from their vendors are being passed on to their clients. And clients that are able to do that are really able to find the money. So on a positive note, in our capital advisory practice, you said you were the bearer of bad news, so am I. This is good for our business. We continue to be very busy, and I want to close with an example. A deal I funded last week. It's a high-risk industry, construction contracting, and there's someone in this room today who can actually attest to this, but they have about a $30 million top line revenue. We just got them $40 million of bank financing, acquisition financing, to acquire 2 to 3 new businesses, 100% loan to value on the acquisition, funded debt to EBITDA 3.5 times, no personal guarantee, and I just funded this last week. So that would be considered a high risk deal, but because it was a strong company led by strong management, the deal got done.
So with that in mind, are there ways to structure deals so you can mitigate some of these risks?
Absolutely, there are. Robert and Kate talked about earnouts. So that's obviously very key. We're finding in terms of purchase price, there's a portion of the purchase price that's being held back. And if the profitability of the business falls below a certain clip level, that's usually clawed back. Working capital adjustments, they were always important, but more important than ever now. So whenever the final working capital adjustment occurs, when the final financial statements are shared just before close, if again, that's below a certain threshold, it's clawed back from the purchase price. For a business where a large percentage of revenues come from one or two customers, if any of the customers leave post-acquisition, that impacts the purchase price. And what we're also seeing is there's indemnity provisions that are encompassing more and more uncertain situations. And that's the buyers, we're seeing the buyers use that more and more in this current environment. So there are a few things that can be done, but not to mislead anyone, there's still quite a bit of opportunity in this market for finance.
So Rob, let's go back to the legal standpoint, the downer standpoint. How can you mitigate the risk of a future dispute arising from a transaction? What are some of the key things you can do?
So I'm gonna suggest two things that you should always bear in mind, because the reality is, people being people, you're not going to be able to ever avoid disputes. Disputes are going to arise, and we've seen the 1:5 ratio. So so let's talk about before litigation and if you are going to have litigation. I think one of the best products you can either use yourself or advise your clients to use, because I know most of the audience here are trusted advisors of companies and people who are going to go through an M&A. It's insurance. And so there's quite a broad range of insurance products available to deal with contingent events, events that have been identified, they're anticipated, and you can't you can't be sure whether they're going to materialize. You can insure those, and it's easy for a litigator to say, because I'm here saying, hey, you should be looking at insurance, and Ian and his fellow corporate lawyers are going to say, well, insurance is expensive, and it doesn't always make sense in the deals, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But a standard approach will be reps and warranties insurance. If for the right deal, if you can get reps and warranties insurance in place, it can really help you. And understand this in terms of we're all about preserving the value. You've negotiated the deal. Shilpa's done a great job of finding you the money. Value's been exchanged. Unexpected event happens. How do we preserve that value? That's what insurance is for. And reps and warranties insurance will help you do that. Hang on to that value. And then if worst case happens and it ends up in litigation, then you need a robust dispute resolution clause. And we'll get into the details of that a little bit later. But that is going to be so important for you and your clients to try and preserve as much of that value as you can.
So as Rob goes on there, Kate, about reps and warranties insurance, is that always available? Is it always there to make sense? Do you have to have a minimum size requirement for your deal?
Those are all great questions. So no, reps and warranties insurance is not always available. It's typically, we're told, only economical for deals with an enterprise value of 30 million or more. Before this presentation, we spoke with Liberty GTS's head of Canada, Josh Goldberg, about what the current market is like for insurance. And we were told that given the current economic headwinds and the fact that the market is fairly soft right now, smaller deals have a better chance of being insured. And we put together a little slide about this to carry it along. So you'll see the comment about market conditions on the left there. Liberty has done deals as small as 10 million for certain brokers and clients. And so we've captured the key takeaway, which is effectively right now, the current climate makes it important to consider it, at least investigate what insurance is available. Yeah. There are smaller retentions that are being negotiated as of right now with a discount of as much as 25%, down from a 1% of enterprise value to 0.75% of enterprise value. So it's worth exploring. And then Rob, I think you were having a conversation at the beginning.
Yeah. So we were actually chatting with Georgia Grunmanis, and we were asking her, because again, we keep saying this, but we're just litigators. So we actually don't know anything. We're only expert in what the case is about on the day we go into court. And then, you know, we tend to forget about it after the fact. We learn it for the day. Georgia is with BFL, insurance brokerage. And we were asking her about this, you know, 30 million rule of thumb that we understood. And we understood that there was, you know, it's a softer market and there's opportunity to get insurance on deals where you wouldn't have been able to in the past. And Georgia was sharing that actually, because BFL being a broker, you know, sees quite a wide range, that there's a huge opportunity to insure deals that you wouldn't have been able to insure before. And Georgia was sharing some numbers with us that I was actually quite surprised by. Like, I wouldn't have thought you would be able to insure, you know, a $5 million enterprise value deal. But it sounds like maybe you can, maybe in the right context, depending on the appetite of your client for risk avoidance. So anyone who wants to chat about that, I strongly recommend that you talk to Georgia or your favorite broker who has experience in the reps and warranty space, because it sounds like a plug for Georgia. But this wasn't a setup. Whether this actually just happened organically before the talk, and it really does illustrate the point that Jonah Goldberg had made to us for this presentation. So,
All right, back to this lovely talk about dispute resolution mechanisms. Kate, that seems basically one of those things to avoid going to court. Why do you want to avoid going to court?
So let me just put us in context here before we dive into this conversation, because I don't know, other than litigators who get paid to go to court, nobody wants to go to court, right? So if you're having this conversation, you are in the middle of a dispute and you've gotten to the point where you need some third-party objective help to get it settled. So you've got two options. You can either go the traditional route, go to the courts, or if you've planned ahead and you've put a dispute resolution clause into your deal documents, you have the opportunity to go to arbitration. We are here to tell you that arbitration is by far the preferable option, and I will tell you a little bit about why. It ultimately boils down to the amount of control that you have over the dispute resolution process that you're entering. I'm going to say to you, arbitration gives you more control in two particular areas that will be beneficial to you. First of all, the timing of things. Courts move slowly, and that is particularly true right now. Once you get into a dispute in the courts, you've got to take a bunch of in-between steps before you finally get to your day at trial. So you've got to exchange documents, there are examinations, and there's any number of issues that may come up along the way that you ultimately are not able to come to a landing on with your opponents, and so you want to get a judge to weigh in and help you move the process along. In order to do that, you've got to bring what's called a motion. In Toronto right now, it's going to take a year to get your motion before a judge. So if anybody involved in the dispute is interested in delaying the resolution, the opportunity to do it is there. And unfortunately, the court schedule is going to assist.
yeah, and understand what that means. When we say a motion, we're talking like you need 20 minutes in front of a judge to get a ruling to move it forward. And it's going to take you a year before you can get that appearance.
And if they need financing for litigation, I can help them to find it. Just as an aside.
And there's insurance products for that as well, but it's a full circle of plugs, but anyhow.
So if the prospective delay was not enough to convince you, the other big point I think is worth considering is the privacy of entering into an arbitration process. So our court system is public. There are good policy reasons for that, but if you or your clients are entering into it, what you've got to know is your relevant emails are likely going to become public. If they're examined, that's going to become public. And the reputational fallout from well-meaning people doing good business going through public litigation can be quite large. Arbitration is private. All the information exchange stays private. The outcome stays private. And you can set it up. I think this is the final point I make on this before I hand it back over. You can set it up so that the decision made by the arbitrator is final. That decision is the end of the dispute. Whereas if you go through a traditional court process, there are opportunities to appeal, and then there are opportunities to appeal potentially the outcome of that appeal. So your judge's decision is not the end of the process. It might be the first step in a very long process.
Yeah, it could be another 2 years probably by the time you exhaust it, and then you seek leave to appeal the Supreme Court of Canada, and they rarely grant leave to appeal on commercial cases. So you know you're going to lose it, but you seek leave because that's what your client wants you to do. And by the time you've gone through the appeal routes, another 2 years, post trial, and it can take 4 years to get to trial. It's
and this comes with this you know, you hear hope for the best, plan for the worst. In your line of work, you are working for the best, but planning for the worst. If you want to have access to private arbitration, you've got to be thinking about that when you're putting your deal documents together. And I think, Rob, you're going to be speaking a little bit about the need to be thinking about that kind of thing from the very get.
Yeah, so Rob, what do you need to include in that dispute resolution clause that can keep us away from the courts and make it so you have a deal that that works?
Okay, so this is why I'm here. When Melanie and Ian invited us to do this, I sort of put my hands together and I said, all right, I get to tell the M&A Club my wish list for a dispute resolution clause. What would make your clients' lives easier? It'll make for both sides happier clients and happier litigators, although no one cares about the litigators, although they should. So dispute resolution clauses. First, a well-constructed clause, do not make them an afterthought. If you don't include it in the original deal documentation, it doesn't matter. You'll never get the other side to agree. Once emotions are up and someone's blaming someone, you will never get agreement. Because at that point, someone's got the cash in their jeans and they want to keep it there and they're happy to delay it when their lawyer tells them, well, we could agree to private arbitration and have this resolved within 18 months, or we could keep the cash in your jeans for 6 years if you want to play the game. And so you got to do it ahead of time. Saves both time and money, which Kate spoke about, and it greatly reduces reputational risk. So 3 essential elements. This is my wish list. First, a process to foster an early business resolution. Anecdotally, we have done a large number of cases where it's the fallout of an M&A transaction. In very, very few of them, typically an SPA, but the deal documentation included a dispute resolution clause that said, for anyone gets to sue, and it was a private arbitration clause, so that was great, but before anyone gets to launch an arbitration, the decision makers of the businesses involved have to get together in person in a meeting and make a good faith effort at resolving the dispute. And that can be a recipe for people to sit around in a boardroom with their lawyers, staring at each other and making accusations. But it can also be a recipe for creativity, because the same people who are stubborn at the beginning, years later, having spent a lot of money on lawyers, having spent a lot of time being examined by lawyers and being somewhat exhausted and sick of the process and they just want closure, they will get creative about how to resolve the dispute. And sometimes it's not an exchange of money. Sometimes it's a further deal or sweeter terms on a different deal. There's creative ways business people can find a resolution together. And what I would like to see is a deal documentation that forces them to at least take a crack at it at the beginning. Because the truth is, on average, the cases that go the distance, which actually put Kate and I in our robes in a trial, which is frankly where we're happiest. That's why we do this. It's our favorite thing to do. The cases that do that, it's largely driven by personality and stubbornness on the decision makers' part who are involved. So have that process, make it without prejudice. I just back up 1 second. Make it without prejudice, which means it's confidential and nothing you say in that process can be used against you in litigation. And then if the clients are sophisticated, and most of your clients will be, but not always, but if they're sophisticated and you think it would make sense, have them get together without lawyers. For my sophisticated institutional clients, I encourage them to reach out and speak to their opposite number without lawyers and see if they can get a deal. And sometimes they do, and it saves everyone time and money. Okay, let's do the next slide. So, mandatory mediation. So make it mandatory, don't make it optional. And make it flexible, because listen to your litigator about when the right time to mediate is. You need a certain amount of information to be able to mediate effectively. And I guess I should pause here and just explain the difference between mediation and arbitration. Arbitration is like a private trial. You hire a retired judge and you hold the trial. Mediation is a refereed negotiation where the person you've hired, could be a retired judge, often is not there to judge who was right, who was wrong. They're there to foster a deal and help you negotiate and point out risks. And so so I would say make the process flexible, make it in person, because I say to clients, A mediation is going to feel like you're sitting around in an airport waiting for a plane that never takes off, because the mediator is going to be visiting the other parties and you're going to be spending a lot of time together in a room just making small talk. But there's something about having everyone physically present that fosters settlement, because people get tired and they just want to go home. Zoom mediations reduce the likelihood of a deal being made. And finally, on mediation, it's about choosing the right mediator. Sometimes you think you want someone with real gravitas, retired Court of Appeal judge, who can often be excellent. But what I want to see in a mediator is someone who's gonna, I use the expression, chase the deal. Someone who wants to get to a deal. And some retired judges are excellent at that. Some retired judges want to judge the case. Some senior litigators who are doing mediation want to just tell people who's right and who's wrong. And that doesn't tend to foster a deal. So not all mediators are created equal. Your litigator will tell you, who they like to use, and you should listen to them on that. And then the next slide is about arbitration. So Kate's already talked to you about why it's the better option, and it really is. It's faster, it's less expensive, and it's above all private. So let me just make one last pitch. Seek broad jurisdiction for the arbitration, and by that I mean, any dispute within the framework of the deal is subject to arbitration. There's no right of appeal. If you pick, the nice thing about private arbitration is you get to pick your judge. In the court system, you're just assigned the judge, and you can. I was assigned the senior Crown attorney who taught me practice of criminal law, who had become a judge, and this was his first securities case. He'd never done it before. He spent his entire life doing criminal law, and he's a great judge and an amazing lawyer, but I'm not a good draw for that trial. And so for arbitration, you get to handpick your judge, and you're picking a judge that the parties agree to it. They'll have a process in place if you can't agree. And I say, if you pick the right judge, trust the judge, and have it a final binding decision, no right of appeal. And that cuts down the nonsense significantly. And one last pitch for private arbitration. The beautiful thing about arbitration is if you have an opponent who likes to play silly games, and I'm talking about the lawyer, and that can suck all the fun out of a court case. And for Kate and I, it is fun. If you have a lawyer on the other side who likes to play silly games, he or she won't be able to do it with a private arbitrator, because it won't take a year to get that 20-minute motion. You pick up the phone or you send an email and you say, we need your help, to the arbitrator. And this famous retired judge, who you're all the judge's client now, will say, yes, I'm available Thursday. Everyone appear. And then on Thursday, they'll say, okay, I probably need 1 hour to resolve this dispute. So, deliver your materials next week. You, the other side, deliver your materials the week after that. We'll argue this 3 weeks from now. And 3 weeks later, you have your result, and the case moves forward. It's fantastic. And the best part is the arbitrator is also your trial judge. And there's nothing that's going to make a litigator, play fair than having to deal with the trial judge all the way through. It really cuts down on the silly games. So that's my pitch that's my wish list for arbitration.
All right, so now that Rob's given us his wish list on what you should include in your deals, let's go back to the deals. Shilpa, how is the deals process different today compared to that height of 2021, 2022, where it was a bit crazy and that M&A boom? Is it more challenging to work with some of the business owners today compared to that heyday in 2021?
So Rob and Kate are here to talk about one thing and one thing only, and that's dispute resolution clauses. I'm here to talk about this one thing and one thing only. How do we prepare our clients for sale? What do we need to do to make sure they're ready mentally and emotionally today in 2022 for sale? So the first thing is, obviously, we talked about the financing, we have to really prepare our clients for the challenges down that path. But it's really about transaction structure. So we know that there was a run up in value over the past few years in terms of transactions. So now there are earnouts, rigorous earnouts are quite common. So what we're finding as advisors is we're spending quite a bit of time with our clients, helping them to understand the earnout. That takes finesse, that takes time, but we're really helping them to understand that if they do the right things for their business, everybody wins at the end. The other piece that valuations. Valuation is always going to be a conversation that we're going to have with your clients. You're going to have with your clients as they take them for sale. There's always going to be a valuation gap between the buyer and the seller. But you know, a lot of business owners, they'll go to a cocktail party, they'll be on the golf course, and they'll hear from their friend that the business is 10 times X. I'm here to say their friend lied or exaggerated. And a lot of business owners have heard about the 2021 valuation. So we're spending a lot of time upfront setting expectations on business value. What's interesting is that in a upward trending market, valuations adjust fast, right? But in a downward trending market, it takes time to adjust the valuations. So it's really around having those conversations around setting expectations around valuations. And finally, it's diligence. Ian was saying he was on a call last night with our diligence team, and we're finding that buyers are doing extensive diligence, and we're preparing our clients for that.
So how are there ways that advisors can shift their approach to help get more deals done right now?
It's really about, I talked about this earlier, preparing the clients. There's a deal that I'm working on right now where we're actually not going to probably sell the business for another year and a half. We're going to really prepare the business. As advisors, we're preparing our clients with capital structure, discipline, making sure they have the right cash flow, that they're doing strategic reviews of their business so that they can really highlight the financial performance of their business, because that's key. In 2021, it was very interesting. We saw a lot of compressed processes. So advisors taking sellers to a very small set of buyers. We're seeing that open up now. We're not, obviously, you know, that 100 buyer process isn't there, but we're seeing that process open up, and obviously the big thing is to finding financing. So right now, if you can find financing, you can convince an owner around the value and get an agreement on price. That's the way to success.
All right. So when you look ahead to beyond just right now, when you look ahead towards 2023, are there certain sectors you think will lead the deal flow this year? Absolutely.
I'm going to start, maybe this might surprise everyone, but tech. We saw a tech M&A boom. There was a transaction that we did. It was an enormously successful tech M&A transaction. We have seen a pullback in tech M&A, but overall, large technology companies continue to have very stable balance sheets, and large companies with stable balance sheets are also looking to expand on their technology offerings. We have all heard about ChatGPT. I was using them last night, maybe to help me with some of this content. Best time is to use them is at 2 a.m. in the morning. But overall, AI M&A is going to continue. So tech is going to be hot. The other area that we're finding a lot of activity in, both from a financing and M&A side, is the renewables. There's a lot of regulation around that with electric vehicles. There's a huge growth, massive growth in this industry. So there's going to be quite a bit of M&A here. And finally, there's distressed M&A. There is uncertainty in the market. Our restructuring teams are quite busy. And so distressed M&A, both from the M&A and the financing side, is going to be an area that's going to keep us busy.
So we've got certain sectors that will be more focused on M&A. Kate, are there certain sectors that have more disputes and the higher dollar value claims when it comes to M&A?
Yes, there are. I feel like there should be a sad trombone sound that plays every time we switch to our end of the table, but I don't want you to think like every time Rob and I start speaking, we're here to bring you bad news. Thank you. Thank you. So it's better than the sound effect that I was envisioning. Let's start again with some context. So the graph that's up on the screen here is borrowed from Liberty's 2022 claims analysis. And this shows you a breakdown of medium and high severity reps and warranties notifications by industry group from January 1, 2021 to August 31, 2022. So you can see there are sectors that where a bunch of claims were being made. So utilities, software and services, pharmaceutical, biotech, and life sciences, materials, et cetera. I won't read the graph to you because that's boring and you can do it on your own, but use it as a jumping point for the rest of the discussion. I want to talk about a couple of areas where it's anticipated that there will be an increase in claims going forward. The first is pharma and biotech. Liberty's experience is that there's no one particular kind of claim that is sort of leading the pack of potential claims in this area. They're seeing all sorts of different claims. So intellectual property related claims, production issues, condition of assets, regulatory compliance, and product liability. If you think back to the image that Rob talked you through earlier with the different buckets of claims, the pharma, biotech, and life sciences sector is seeing claims in all of those areas. And it's expected that that will continue and increase. Waste recycling, growing largely out of environmental issues, is expected to be an area where claims will increase, and the utilities industry as well. Particularly in Liberty's experience, gas turbine deals. They report that they've received claims on 50% of the gas turbine deals that they've written since 2020. I don't have these numbers memorized, I'm sorry, that's why I've got to look at my sheet. Maybe not surprising when you think about the complexity of the machines that are being dealt with there. But based on that experience, Liberty isn't underwriting those kinds of risks without a condition of asset exclusion, pardon me. So there's some views on claims that will be coming through. Interestingly enough, in real estate, Liberty is not seeing high severity notifications, but an increase in low and medium severity notifications, generally involving defects or deficiencies in a property. So that's an overview of some areas where we expect to see claims increase. This isn't just bad news for all of you, but it's information for you to keep an eye on these sectors as we expect that issues will come up there.
All right, so let's go back to you a bit, Shilpa. If you pull out your crystal ball and when you look ahead, what is your short, medium, and long-term view for the future of the M&A market here in Canada?
The short, medium, long-term view is a tsunami's coming. That slide says it all. So about 3/4 of business owners are planning to sell their businesses over the next decade. And 75% of those that decide to sell will be retiring. So if that math comes true, there's $2 trillion in deal value that's going to be up for grabs in the next 10 years. So overall, we see our private owner operator businesses continuing to keep us busy with M&A. And on the financing side, given the caution that exists in the market, we anticipate to be busy on that side as well.
So Rob, if you pull out your crystal ball, the downer one, what's your view of the future of the M&A disputes?
It's a tsunami, but it's 1/5 the size of Shilpa's. Shilpa's got a tsunami of cash, a happy tsunami
I
coming.
love
with
the
it.
drama. That's why, Rob.
That's why I'm a litigator, that you're all going to surf with your clients. And for us, it's, the disputes are going to rise in tandem. And I just want to build on a point Kate made. And it can, I want to emphasize it because it can get lost. What Liberty being an example, what was it, that the gas, the gas turbines. Great example. What happens when you see 50% of gas turbine deals resulting in a claim? Well, you get exclusions, and now you can't get insurance. You can get insurance for the deal, but there's going to be an exclusion for the condition of asset of the gas turbines. And so as reps and warranties insurance evolves, and as the providers of that insurance become more knowledgeable about the risks that are going to materialize, you're going to see greater exclusions. And so to take it full circle, that comes back to the dispute resolution clause, all the more reason to have a robust one available to you to protect yourself. That would be my final comment.
All right, as we wrap up here, Shilpa, I just want to ask, do you have any final remarks you'd like to add?
It's all about ESG. We've talked about it. Kate's talked about it. I've talked about it. ESG is key on the agenda for both M&A and for financing providers. There is climate change is a key topic. Governments are going to be introducing regulation around ESG. And it's also become a pillar of value creation. So whenever private equity now looks at a transaction, ESG is key on their agenda. And buyers are looking at diversity, a diversity of an organization as they look to buy. So it's very, very important for us as advisors and for our clients to look at how ESG can add value to their business, because the clients and the business owners that do that will inherently enhance the profitability of their business.
And Kate, anything to add to that point?
Well, just following on Shilpa's comments, the way that we generally see this work out is, so first there's quite a bit of interest in ESG right now, and I'm sure that you are experiencing that. And following interest comes rules and regulations, and then opportunities for disputes and concerns. So I think everybody's anticipating that this will be an area where we see increased claims and increased disputes. And that is enhanced. I don't think that's the right word. Feeding into that is the fact that up until this point, there's very little standardization in the way that these topics are discussed. So companies are sharing information that puts them in the best possible light, which is totally understandable, but you're not comparing apples to apples at this point in time. As regulation and rules are introduced, that will change. And as that changes, there will be a lot of, I think, holding up. You said you look like this. How does that compare to the regulations? Are you compliant? Will you be compliant going forward? Because ESG is about what your company looks like now and what you promise it will look like in the future. For the most part, the claims and disputes that we're seeing are coming up in the environmental area for now. But we anticipate that these topics are going to find their way into your deal negotiations in other ways. And I'll give you an example. You will have read, I expect, that some buyers are looking for representation, for example, that there haven't been any claims of sexual harassment against any of the executives at the company, past or present. And so once those representations start working their way into deal documentation, they become the basis for potential disputes going forward. So what's the takeaway on that point? Keep an eye on the regulations so you can be as informed as you can be as it comes up for your clients, and work on accuracy as you're thinking about the way to sell your clients or your businesses on these three fronts.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for our panelists here today, Shilpa, Kate, and Rob, for all their keen insight to the challenges of mergers and acquisitions in this uncertain economic time. As you see, their contact info is up there on the screen for anyone who might like to reach out to them and get their valued opinion. I hope the audience got some great information from this discussion today. I was certainly enlightened. It's not an area I've heard that much about. So let's give our panelists a round of applause, and thank you to Gillian for hosting us in the M&A Club of Toronto. And as well, we'll open the floor to questions if anyone has something they'd like to ask of the panelists. We have a microphone here to, there has to be a few questions.
At least one question.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you mentioned, just sort of, it seemed to me in passing, that valuations were down. Have you had to deal with owners in the lower mid-market or the mid-market who are fighting that and saying, no, this is the valuation I want, and you guys got to prove to me that my company's worth this?
Very topical question. If I may be honest, that conversation has been more challenging in the past. What we're finding is that owners and operators, when they're presented with the data today, they are more likely to listen to their advisor on what the valuation of the business is than they were 2 years ago. So in some ways, the market uncertainty and all of the challenges have helped set those expectations and helps us with our work. But absolutely, that's a key conversation. But to be honest, it's always a key conversation with our clients.
I wanted to I'll ask another question. But ESG, do you not find that for, again, the lower mid-market, or let's say EV up to, I don't know, 25 million or something, that it's not really a consideration in a lot of these firms are not dealing with this issue, but it's more the larger companies, the public companies, that really are being more sensitized to it. As I say, what I see is that in the lower mid-market, a lot of people, unbelievably, are not even I mean, they're not even, talking about it.
Half agree. In the very lower mid market, absolutely, they're just trying to get their businesses up and going. But I would say in the mid market and the upper mid market, especially in industries like construction, it's a key consideration because it's a consideration for financing providers. Banks are looking at the ESG agenda. Diversity is a key consideration. So it depends on the industry, but I would say in the mid market to the upper mid market, because it could impact their financing, their ability to sell their business. Clients are in fact looking at it.
All right, we have a question here from Ian.
Hey, just a comment on the ESG point. Where I do see it in the lower mid market is not so much it's in two places. One, it's in reps and warranties in the deal documents, and then it's certainly in the employment agreements for the executives that are being hired or that are going with the new team. And we're certainly seeing, detailed expectations of, meeting certain standards and losing consideration if they're fired for cause for certain reasons that you've described. So we are seeing it filtering in certain ways. And as to Kate's point, we're going to see the regulations or the practices develop, and then we're going to see disputes around them. I had a question for Kate and Rob. So while you're talking there, I went and sort of checked the stats on deal point studies that the ABA publishes that many of the lawyers in this space are active in. In less than 20% of deals, interestingly, and this is consistent across roughly a decade, you see dispute resolution clauses. In other words, most M&A deals structured in Canada or the United States end up going to, the dispute resolution is to court.
Yeah.
And that's true for private equity groups. That's true for strategic buyers and so forth. And I totally agree with you that pushing it to a dispute resolution process, which is private and makes a lot of sense. So how do you convince a whole bunch of smart private equity players in the U.S. that it's in their interest to do private disputes? And what would your pitch to them be?
Right. So if we're talking specifically about U.S., I would say to them that the Canadian judicial system, although excellent, and it is excellent in terms of the quality and the ethics of it, really that there isn't a better one in the world, and I'm not just saying that. It's overburdened, and COVID has made it even more overburdened. And the reality is that when that system is faced with competing demands from the criminal justice system and the civil justice system, unless it involves the rights of children in the civil justice system, the criminal justice system is going to be given priority. So I have had, we get a call, we're starting a trial next week. We get a call from the court, and it says, and they say, sorry, you've lost your judge. We don't have a judge for you. Your judge got scooped to go over on the criminal side, because there's case law that says trial has to happen within a certain amount of time in a criminal case, or it's dismissed for delay. And we need the judges to get the trials through. And that's happened to me more than once. Now, you still get your trial eventually, but you've geared up. And understand, if you're going to do a 2-week trial or a 3-week trial, and that's the shortest trial you're going to be doing in this kind of case, there's a huge amount of prep that gets done for that. And then you got to re-prep. Not to the same degree, but it's a time and value suck. So I would say to them that, and since they're Americans, I would say, well, let's privatize it. Let's put it over into the private sector, and you can pick your judge. And if you want to for a mediator, there's some really great American judges who are fantastic mediators. You're not going to want to pick an American judge for the arbitration, but throw a bit of that, a bit of an acknowledgement. They love acknowledgements of how good they are in their system, and they are. They have a court there. They call it the rocket docket, and it's a commercial court, and it just cuts through it. It's fantastic. And that's within their own judicial system. So tell them that we want to build build privately the rocket docket equivalent. And I think that'll speak to them.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Raise your hand. I'm happy to pass the mic.
Melanie has one.
Downers, Kate and Rob. Do you see, so you talked about arbitration, private arbitration, mediation. Do you see any move towards need/arb in the commercial side or in M&A disputes?
It's very, very dependent on the personalities at play. And at the risk of boring you all, a med-arb or a mediation arbitration is a hybrid procedure in which your third-party independent decision maker first engages to try to facilitate a resolution. And if that is not successful, then you switch into your sort of traditional dispute resolution. So it can be attractive to people who are interested in trying to pursue a business resolution, but also don't want to lose any time and want to have some of the benefits of that negotiation feed into the decision-making process. For some people, that's really not an attractive proposition for a variety of reasons. So it is, in my experience, it really does come down to the personalities at play.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say, like, I've been practicing for 25 years, and I'm not a huge fan of mediation arbitration for the work that I do. And part of the reason is it tends to turn the mediation into a more adversarial process because you're not as inclined to be candid with the mediator about the risks that you do recognize in the case. And because the mediator is your trial judge, so you don't want to suggest that that you're seeing a weakness in an argument that you intend to make. And so litigators, we're a funny bunch. We're very, very candid with our clients, or the good litigators are very candid, very open with our clients about the risks that we see. But then when we walk into court on the day of, we call it, we drink the Kool-Aid. We are true believers. And you got to believe it if you're going to sell it. And so you sort of commit to the argument. And so mediation arbitration, I find that it makes it less likely you're going to get the mediated resolution. I'd rather do a pure mediation and then a separate arbitration with your trial judge. But that's just my preference.
Any other questions here from the room or online? No.
Yes, we have some question online. I'm going to read the questions for you. Are you seeing any difference between pricing by financial buyer and strategic buyer and US versus Canadian buyers?
What we're finding right now is that US private equity firms are extremely active here in Canada. Our business gets calls every single day from US private equity firms, and they very much want to be involved in the Canadian lower, middle, and upper mid-market. So I would say, I mean, essentially, there's really no difference, but overall, from a US buyer perspective, there is quite a bit of interest. What I would like to highlight is the difference between US financiers and Canadian financiers, if I may. Overall, in the US, financing has pretty much dried up from the big banks. But what we're finding is the Canadian banks continue to be active for very, very good deals. But what's interesting is US private equity funds, and not to offend the Canadian the Canadian alternative debt funds in the room, but US alternative debt funds have provided, continue to provide, and I think will provide terms and conditions that sometimes compete with the Canadian banks. So as we take deals to market, we are actually working quite a bit with the US private debt funds, which are very, very competitive in their offerings.
Do you have the next question?
Yes, many thanks. So I'm going to read the next question. 30% of Canadian business credit was completed by other lenders. What counts as other lenders, and how are you expecting this number to increase over the near future?
So I think that goes to the chart that I had, which had Canadian lending landscape and had 60% bank and 40% as other lenders. So that 40%, Laura is taking us to that chart. This is near and dear to me because I work with this 40% quite a bit. So I would say this is Canadian alternative debt funds, US alternative debt funds, Canadian and US private equity funds that provide financing, and also insurance companies. I do a lot of work with Manulife. They provide really competitive financing in real estate and also with alternative debt. So that's what the other lenders is. And it's amazing that 40% of our market is this other lenders.
Thank you. No more question on our side.
Any other questions here in the room? I have one I'd like to ask Rob and Kate. You talk about choosing your arbitrator or choosing your mediator. Do you dial like mediators or us? Or is there a list of retired judges? Like I've kind of I have no idea how you do that.
Yeah, there's well, you hire leading counsel who know about these things, and so it's retired judges will get involved in various, they call them chambers, but various arbitration chambers. So there's I won't say the name, but there's an excellent trial judge who just retired from the Superior Court of Justice. Reached out to me on LinkedIn to let me know that he's mediating and arbitrating now, and I've already put his name for it because he's great, and he was great at settling things at pre-trials, and he was great at trials. And Kate knows who I'm speaking of, and so I'm already wanting to use him. So yes, they're out there, they're organized, and it's a bit of a growth industry now, and I think it'll become more so.
Are there enough out there to handle if every deal has a dispute resolution mechanism?
Oh yeah, I'm a big believer in the market, and the fact that if you have more and more disputes out of the tsunami, and they all have private arbitration clauses, yeah, there'll be enough arbitrators to handle.
Excellent. Well, I guess that wraps it up for today. And thank you everyone for your time.